In the early 1800s, on a quiet farm in rural Tennessee, one family claimed they were being terrorized by something they couldn't see. It began with strange animals appearing near the property. Then came scratching at the walls, knocking in the night, whispers from empty rooms, and eventually, a voice. A voice that reportedly knew the Bell family's secrets, tormented their daughter, and promised that one member of the family would die. For more than 2 centuries, the story has survived as one of America's most disturbing supernatural legends. This is the story of the Bell Witch. In the early 1800s, John Bell moved his family from North Carolina to Robertson County, Tennessee, near what is now the town of Adams. The Bells became a prominent farming family in the community. They raised crops, acquired land, and built a life in the Tennessee countryside. There was nothing about their home that suggested it would eventually become connected to one of the most famous hauntings in American folklore. For years, life on the Bell farm appears to have been relatively ordinary, but according to the legend, that changed around 1817. The Bell household was large, and among the children was John Bell's daughter, Betsy. At first, the strange events were reportedly small enough that the family could dismiss them. Unusual sounds around the property, something moving outside, noises that seemed to have perfectly reasonable explanations. But those explanations became harder to accept when several members of the household began experiencing unusual things. And before long, the Bells reportedly realized the disturbances weren't staying outside. As darkness settled over the Tennessee countryside each evening, the Bell farm became a very different place. According to later accounts, strange noises began surrounding the home after sunset. The family reportedly heard scratching against the exterior walls. Then came sounds resembling footsteps. But when someone went outside to investigate, there was nobody there. Whatever was happening seemed to disappear the moment someone tried to find its source. And then John Bell allegedly saw something in his fields that he couldn't explain. According to one of the most famous parts of the Bell Witch legend, John Bell was walking through his cornfield when he spotted a strange animal. Descriptions vary depending on the telling, but it is often described as having characteristics of both a dog and a rabbit. John reportedly raised his gun and fired at the creature, but instead of finding an injured animal, the creature simply vanished. No body, no blood, nothing. John returned home confused by what he had seen, and according to the legend, that encounter was only the beginning. Soon, other members of the family reportedly began seeing unusual animals around the property. Some versions of the story describe a strange dog. Others mention an unusual bird. The details changed as the legend was retold over generations, but one theme remained consistent. Something unfamiliar seemed to be watching the Bell farm, and after the sightings began, the disturbances inside the house reportedly intensified. At night, the Bells allegedly heard knocking against the walls, scratching near the windows, and sounds resembling something walking around the house. John would investigate. The family would look outside, but they reportedly found nothing. Eventually, the sounds weren't just coming from outside anymore. They seemed to be coming from inside the walls, and whatever was making them was becoming louder. Night after night, the disturbances reportedly continued. The Bells heard knocking, scratching, and strange noises moving through different areas of the home. At first, the family tried to keep the experiences private. In a small rural community, telling your neighbors that an invisible presence was attacking your home wasn't exactly something you wanted spreading around town, but eventually the activity became impossible to ignore. The family reportedly began listening carefully to the sounds. Sometimes the knocking appeared to move from one wall to another. Other times, noises seemed to come from underneath beds or from dark corners of the house. According to later accounts, the children also experienced frightening disturbances while trying to sleep. Blankets were allegedly pulled from beds. Strange sounds occurred beside them, and Betsy Bell would soon become one of the presence's primary targets. John Bell reportedly searched repeatedly for an explanation. Loose boards, animals underneath the house, branches striking the walls, anything that could explain what they were hearing. But according to the legend, nothing did. Then something changed. The strange noises began resembling faint whispers. At first, the family couldn't understand them, but gradually, the whispers supposedly became clearer, until the Bell family realized something astonishing. Whatever was inside their home was trying to speak. The voice was reportedly faint at first, but according to the stories, it gradually became strong enough for people inside the house to understand it. The entity supposedly whispered, laughed, sang, and answered questions. It could reportedly imitate different people, and in some accounts it even repeated sermons and hymns that family members had heard elsewhere. The phenomenon had changed completely. This wasn't simply knocking anymore. The Bells believed they were communicating with an intelligent presence. Eventually, the family began allowing trusted neighbors and visitors into the house. According to later accounts, some of those witnesses claimed they heard the mysterious voice themselves. Word spread throughout the surrounding community. People came to hear the strange presence that supposedly lived with the Bell family. Different theories emerged about what it was: a ghost, a spirit, something demonic. But eventually, the entity became associated with one particular name, Kate. One popular version of the legend connected the spirit to a local woman named Kate Batts, who supposedly had a dispute with John Bell. Over time, the mysterious presence became known as Kate, the Bell Witch. But there's an important distinction. Much of what we know about the Bell Witch comes from accounts written and published decades after the alleged events. That means separating documented history from folklore isn't always easy. Still, the legend says that Kate wasn't finished because her attention would soon turn toward John Bell's daughter, Betsy. As stories of the haunting spread, Betsy Bell became central to the legend. She was still young when the disturbances reportedly began. According to later accounts, the entity's behavior toward Betsy became particularly cruel. She allegedly experienced hair pulling, pinching, and slapping from something nobody else could see. At night, she reportedly struggled to sleep as the disturbances continued around her. And the invisible presence supposedly became obsessed with one part of Betsy's life, her relationship with a young man named Joshua Gardner. The strange events were no longer just a Bell family secret. Visitors reportedly came to the property hoping to witness the phenomenon themselves. Stories were repeated, experiences were remembered, and eventually they were written down. But this is where the Bell Witch story becomes difficult for historians. The most influential written accounts appeared long after the alleged haunting. So although the Bell family themselves were real, many of the supernatural details cannot be independently verified today. Image 3. Trying to understand the entity. Still, the legend continued growing. People attempted to understand exactly what the presence wanted. According to the story, Kate strongly opposed Betsy's relationship with Joshua Gardner and repeatedly demanded that she end it. Eventually, Betsy and Joshua reportedly broke off their engagement, but even that didn't end the haunting, because by this point, another member of the Bell family was reportedly suffering, John Bell himself, and according to the legend, Kate hated him most of all. By the time the haunting supposedly reached its peak, stories about the Bell family had spread beyond their farm. Visitors reportedly arrived hoping to hear the mysterious voice. Some accounts claim the entity would argue with guests, answer questions, and demonstrate knowledge of events happening far from the Bell home. The story became so extraordinary that generations later, one particularly famous visitor would be added to the legend: Andrew Jackson. But historians have found no reliable contemporary evidence proving Jackson actually visited the Bell farm because of the haunting. While outsiders became fascinated with the mysterious entity, John Bell's health reportedly began deteriorating. He experienced physical problems that left him increasingly weak. According to the supernatural version of the story, Kate openly claimed she was responsible for his suffering. The entity supposedly announced that she intended to torment John and eventually kill him. Whether those claims were actually made at the time is impossible to establish today, but they became one of the darkest parts of the Bell Witch legend. In December of 1820, John Bell died, and the legend says his death came with one final mystery. According to later accounts, the family discovered a strange vial near his medicine. The substance was supposedly tested on a cat, which then died. The entity called Kate allegedly claimed she had poisoned John Bell herself. There is no reliable historical evidence proving that supernatural explanation, but John Bell's real death became permanently intertwined with the legend, and according to the story, even his funeral wasn't peaceful, because witnesses later claimed that as John Bell was being buried, Kate could be heard laughing and singing. And yet, the Bell Witch story still wasn't over. The Bell family's story didn't disappear after the strange events of the early 1800s. Instead, it spread. Stories traveled throughout Tennessee about the family who had supposedly lived with an invisible entity, one that could speak, predict events, torment its victims, and seemingly appear whenever it wanted. As the years passed, each retelling added another layer to the legend. And soon, the Bell Witch became much bigger than one family's frightening experience. Neighbors and visitors were said to have witnessed the strange activity for themselves. According to later accounts, people gathered inside the Bell home to hear the mysterious voice. Some supposedly questioned it, others challenged it, and the entity reportedly responded with frightening intelligence. It was said to know conversations that happened miles away and details it seemingly couldn't have known. But one of the most famous stories involved a man who would eventually become president of the United States, Andrew Jackson. Legend claims Andrew Jackson traveled to the Bell property with several men after hearing about the haunting. According to the story, their wagon suddenly stopped near the farm and couldn't be moved, even though nothing appeared to be blocking it. Then a mysterious voice supposedly announced that they could continue. Jackson allegedly spent the night investigating the haunting. There's just one problem. Historians have found no reliable contemporary evidence confirming that this famous visit actually happened. But the story became one of the most enduring pieces of Bell Witch folklore. And while the legend continued to grow, the Bell family had already suffered a very real loss. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell died. He was around 70 years old. His death was real, but what supposedly happened surrounding his final days became one of the darkest parts of the Bell Witch legend. Later accounts claimed that shortly before his death, the family discovered a mysterious vial containing an unknown liquid. And according to the story, the entity known as Kate made a horrifying confession. She claimed she had given it to John. The legend says the family tested a small amount of the mysterious substance on a cat. The animal supposedly died. The bottle was then reportedly thrown into the fireplace, where it produced a strange flame. These details come from later accounts of the haunting, not contemporary medical documentation. We don't know exactly what caused John Bell's death, but within the Bell Witch story, his death became the moment when the entity supposedly fulfilled its darkest promise. Kate had claimed she would kill John Bell, and now he was dead. Even the funeral supposedly wasn't the end. As John Bell's family and neighbors gathered to bury him, later versions of the story claim something extraordinary happened. A disembodied voice could supposedly be heard near the mourners, laughing, singing, mocking the family as John Bell was lowered into the ground. According to the legend, Kate celebrated the death of the man she had allegedly tormented for years. But after John Bell was buried, The mysterious presence began to fade. Eventually, it reportedly announced that it was leaving, but it also made a promise it would return. More than 2 centuries later, the Bell Witch legend remains tied to this area of Tennessee, and one location has become particularly famous, the Bell Witch Cave. The cave sits on property historically associated with the Bell family near Adams, Tennessee. Over generations, folklore connected the cave to the mysterious entity, and eventually, another disturbing story emerged. One legend tells of children exploring the cave when one of them became trapped in a hole. As the others desperately tried to pull the child free, a mysterious voice was supposedly heard inside the darkness. Then, according to the story, unseen hands pulled the child from the opening. Like many Bell Witch stories, the tale is difficult to verify historically, but it helped transform the cave into an important part of the legend. And visitors continue coming here today. Modern visitors have reported their own unusual experiences around the cave and property. Some describe unexplained sounds, others claim to have heard voices, or felt as though someone was standing behind them when nobody was there. There are stories of strange photographs, sudden cold sensations, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. None of these experiences prove that something supernatural inhabits the cave, but they have kept the Bell Witch legend alive for more than 200 years, and perhaps that's what makes this story so unsettling. We know the Bell family existed. We know John Bell died in 1820, but the entity they supposedly called Kate, that's where history ends and legend begins. The Bell Witch remains one of America's oldest and most enduring supernatural legends. Was the Bell family truly terrorized by something they couldn't explain? Was the story exaggerated as it passed from one generation to another? Or did something happen on that Tennessee farm that we've never been able to understand? Whatever the truth may be, the story of the Bell Witch has survived for more than 2 centuries. And somewhere beneath the Tennessee countryside, the cave associated with the legend still remains, waiting in the darkness. Would you enter the Bell Witch Cave alone at night? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy true ghost stories, haunted history, and unexplained legends, subscribe to Halloween Night Vibe, because there are plenty more stories waiting for us.